They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when blood becomes poison? When the hands that should protect you are the ones that reach for your wallet before they reach for your heart? Mrs. Eleanor Gray knew the answer to that question, and it killed her slowly, not with a knife, not with violence, but with silence, with greed dressed up as love, with phone calls that only came when bills were due. She was 73 years old when she made the decision that would shock an entire town, a decision that would tear a family apart, a decision that would reveal the ugliest truth about human nature, that some people love you only for what you can give them. Eleanor Gray was a retired schoolteacher. For 47 years, she stood in front of chalkboards, teaching grammar, poetry, history, and life. She taught children how to read, how to think, how to dream. She gave them the tools to build futures they couldn't yet imagine. But her own family? They never learned the lessons she tried to teach. On a cold November morning, the town of Maplewood gathered at the law office of Harrison & Co. The air was thick with tension. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the windows. Inside, the Gray family sat in expensive chairs, their faces tight with anticipation. They had come for the reading of the will. Eleanor Gray had passed away 2 weeks earlier, peacefully, they said, in her sleep, alone, in her small cottage on Riverside Lane. No one had been there to hold her hand. No one had been there to say goodbye. But now they were all here. Her 2 sons, Michael and David, her daughter, Christine, her 5 grandchildren, even her sister, Margaret, who hadn't spoken to Eleanor in 12 years. They filled the room with their expensive coats and designer handbags. They smelled of perfume and ambition. Their eyes glittered with one unspoken question: how much? Attorney Jonathan Harrison cleared his throat. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of human greed. He opened the leather folder slowly, deliberately. "Thank you all for coming," he began. His voice was calm, professional, but there was something underneath it, something heavy. As you know, Mrs. Eleanor Gray passed away on November 3rd. She left behind a will, which she updated 6 months ago. I was her attorney for 30 years, and I can assure you that she was of sound mind and clear intention when she made these decisions. Michael leaned forward. He was the eldest son, 49 years old, a real estate developer with a Rolex on his wrist and debt hidden behind his smile. "Let's get to it, Jonathan," he said. "We've all had a long couple of weeks." Christine shot him a look. She was 45, polished, cold, a woman who measured love in dollars and respect in inheritances. "Show some respect, Michael," she hissed, but her eyes said the same thing his did. "Hurry up." Jonathan nodded slowly. "Very well." He adjusted his glasses and began to read. "I, Eleanor Margaret Gray, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The room fell silent. "To my son, Michael Gray, I leave him my gratitude for the childhood memories we shared. I leave him nothing more, as he has made it clear over the years that my value to him was monetary, not maternal." Michael's face went white. "What?" "To my son, David Gray, I leave my hope that he will one day learn to call his mother without needing to ask for money first. I leave him nothing more." David's jaw clenched. His wife gripped his hand, her eyes wide with shock. "To my daughter, Christine Gray, I leave her my forgiveness for the Thanksgivings she missed, the birthdays she forgot, and the promises she broke. I leave her nothing more." Christine stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is insane," she shouted. "She can't do this." "Please sit down, Miss Gray," Jonathan said quietly. "I'm not finished." Christine sat, but her hands were shaking. Jonathan took a breath. "To my grandchildren, I leave my love. That is all I have left to give them, as their parents taught them to see me as a bank, not a grandmother." One of the grandchildren, a young man named Tyler, looked down at his hands. Shame flickered across his face. But the others? They looked angry. Jonathan paused. Then he read the final line, the line that would change everything. "To James Collier, The young man who mowed my lawn, brought me groceries, and sat with me on lonely evenings when my own family could not be bothered. I leave the entirety of my estate, my home, my savings, my investments, everything I have worked for, I leave to him, because he gave me something my family never did. He gave me his time, and time, I have learned, is the only currency that truly matters. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. And then, chaos. Let's go back. 5 years earlier. Before the lawyers. Before the will. Before the betrayal that no one saw coming. Eleanor Gray was 68 years old, and she was alone. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, she had been alone for a very long time. Her husband, Thomas, had died 9 years earlier. A heart attack. Sudden. Brutal. One moment, he was laughing at the dinner table. The next, he was gone. She had loved him deeply, and when he died, a part of her died too. But she didn't collapse. Eleanor wasn't the type to collapse. She was a teacher. She knew how to endure, how to adapt, how to survive. So she kept going. She woke up every morning, she made her tea, she tended her garden, she read her books, she wrote letters to old students who still remembered her. But the house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that echoed in empty rooms. Her children visited sometimes. Michael came twice a year, once on her birthday, once at Christmas. He always brought flowers, expensive ones, and he always stayed for exactly 45 minutes, just long enough to seem dutiful, just short enough to avoid real conversation. "How are you, Mom?" he'd ask, already checking his watch. "I'm fine, dear," she'd say. And that was it. He never asked how she really was, never asked if she was lonely, never asked if she needed anything other than money, which he borrowed often and repaid never. David was worse. He lived 2 hours away and called once a month, always with the same script. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. How's everything?" "Good, David. How are the kids?" "Great, great. Listen, I hate to ask, but..." And there it was, the real reason for the call. A loan for a car repair, a loan for a medical bill, a loan for a business venture that never quite worked out. Eleanor always said yes, because she loved him, because she remembered the little boy who used to climb into her lap and ask her to read him stories. But that boy was gone, and the man who replaced him only called when he needed something. Christine was different. She didn't ask for money. She didn't need to. She had married a wealthy surgeon and lived in a gated community with a pool and a 3-car garage. But she was busy, always busy. Too busy for lunch, too busy for phone calls, too busy to visit her aging mother who lived alone in a cottage that smelled like lavender and regret. "I'll come by soon, Mom," she'd promise. But soon never came, and Eleanor stopped expecting it. She stopped expecting anything from any of them. That's when the loneliness really set in. It wasn't loud, it was quiet. A slow, creeping emptiness that filled the spaces between her heartbeats. She'd sit in her rocking chair by the window, watching the world go by, and wonder when she had become invisible. When had she stopped being a mother? When had she become just an obligation, a name on a contact list, a voice on the other end of the phone that only mattered when there was something to gain? She didn't cry. Eleanor wasn't the type to cry. But sometimes, late at night, she'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, and she'd feel the weight of it all pressing down on her chest. The weight of being forgotten, of being used, of being loved conditionally. And she'd whisper into the darkness, "Is this all I was worth?" Then one day, everything changed. It was a Saturday morning in early spring, the kind of morning where the air smells like rain and possibility. Eleanor was in her front yard, struggling with an old lawnmower that refused to start. She pulled the cord once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. She wiped her sweat from her forehead and sighed. "Ma'am?" She turned. A young man stood at the edge of her driveway. He was maybe 25 years old, tall, thin, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and a shy smile that seemed unsure of itself. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, "but I noticed you were having trouble. Do you need help?" Eleanor studied in. He wore faded jeans and a flannel shirt. His hands were rough, working hands. There was dirt under his nails. "I don't have much money to pay you," she said honestly. The young man shook his head. "I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking if you need help." Something about the way he said it, simple, genuine, without expectation, made Eleanor's throat tighten. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you." His name was James Collier. He lived 3 streets over in a small apartment above a laundromat. He worked 2 jobs, one at a grocery store, one at a gas station, and went to community college at night. He didn't have much, but he had something Eleanor's family didn't. He had time, and he gave it freely. That first day, he fixed her lawnmower in 10 minutes. Then he mowed her entire lawn, trimmed the hedges, and watered her flowers. When he was done, Eleanor invited him in for lemonade. They sat on her porch and talked. Not about money, not about favors, just talked. About life, about dreams, about the small, beautiful things that people forget to notice. James told her about his mother, who raised him alone after his father left, about how she'd worked 3 jobs to put him through high school, about how she died 2 years ago from cancer, and how he still missed her every single day. Eleanor told her about Thomas, about teaching, about the garden she'd planted 40 years ago that still bloomed every spring. They talked until the sun set, and when James finally left, Eleanor sat on her porch for a long time, staring at the stars. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt seen. James came back the next weekend, and the weekend after that. At first, it was just yard work, mowing the lawn, fixing the fence, cleaning the gutters. But slowly, it became more. He started bringing her groceries when he noticed she struggled to carry them from the car. He started checking her smoke detectors, her locks, her furnace, things her sons should have been doing, but never did. And most importantly, he started staying. Not for money, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. They'd sit on her porch in the evenings, drinking tea and watching the world turn gold with sunset. Eleanor would tell him stories about her students, about the boy who couldn't read until 3rd grade and went on to become a lawyer, about the girl who wrote poetry on napkins and grew up to publish books. James would listen, really listen, not with one eye on his phone, not with one foot already out the door. He listened like her words mattered, like she mattered. And slowly, Eleanor began to feel alive again. But her family? They didn't notice. Michael called once that spring. He needed $5,000 for a business opportunity. Eleanor said no for the first time in her life. "Mom, come on," Michael said, his voice tight with frustration. "It's a sure thing. I'll pay you back in 6 months." "You said that last time, Michael." "This is different. It's always different." Silence. Then, "Fine, I'll figure it out myself." He hung up. He didn't call again for 4 months. David was worse. When Eleanor told him she couldn't lend him money for his daughter's braces, he exploded. "You're my mother," he shouted. "How can you say no?" "I've said yes 100 times, David, and you've never paid me back once." "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" He didn't speak to her for 6 months after that. Christine didn't ask for money, but she asked for something worse. She wanted Eleanor to co-sign a loan for a vacation home. "It's an investment, Mom. Property values are going up. You'd be helping us and helping yourself." "I don't need a vacation home, Christine. You don't have to use it. Just sign the papers." "No." Silence. "Wow," Christine said coldly. "I guess I know where I stand." "Do you?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Do you really?" Christine hung up, and Eleanor sat in her kitchen staring at the phone, wondering when her love had become something to resent. James noticed. He didn't pry. He didn't ask questions, but he saw the sadness in her eyes after those phone calls. He saw the way she'd sit a little longer in her chair, staring at nothing. One evening, after a particularly brutal call from Michael, Eleanor finally broke. "Do you ever feel like you've given everything to people who didn't want it?" she asked softly. James looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. "Every day," he said. "When my mom died, I thought people would be there for me, friends, family, but they weren't. Everyone had their own lives, their own problems. I was just in the way." Eleanor nodded. "It's the loneliest feeling in the world," she whispered. "It is," James agreed. "But you're not alone anymore, Mrs. Gray. I'm here." And he meant it. A year passed. Eleanor's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow, inevitable decay of age. Her knees hurt, her back ached, her hands shook when she tried to write. James helped her with everything. He drove her to doctor's appointments, he picked up her prescriptions, he made sure she ate real meals, not just crackers and tea. And when she was too tired to garden, he did it for her. Her roses still bloomed, her lilies still grew, because James made sure of it. Eleanor's family? They didn't notice. Michael called twice that year, both times to complain about his business, both times to hint, strongly, that a little financial help would go a long way. Eleanor said no both times. David sent a Christmas card with a generic message and no return address. Christine sent nothing. But James? James was there every single day. And Eleanor began to realize something. This boy, this stranger who owed her nothing, had given her more love in 2 years than her own children had given her in 2 decades. It was a painful realization, a heartbreaking one, but it was also freeing, because it meant she could finally let go of the guilt of not being enough, the guilt of disappointing them, the guilt of saying no. She didn't owe them anything, not anymore. That's when Eleanor made the decision. She called Jonathan Harrison, her attorney, and scheduled a meeting. "I need to change my will," she said. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure, Eleanor?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She told him everything, about her children's greed, about their neglect, about the years of conditional love that felt more like extortion than family. And she told him about James, about his kindness, his patience, his presence. "I want to leave everything to him," she said firmly. Jonathan hesitated. "Eleanor, your family will contest this. You know that, right?" "Let them," Eleanor said. Her voice was calm, resolved. "They don't love me, Jonathan. They love what I can give them, and I'm done giving." Jonathan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, I'll draft the paperwork." And he did. Eleanor signed it 6 months before she died. She didn't tell anyone, not her children, not James. It was her secret, her final act of justice. A year passed. Eleanor's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow, inevitable decay of age. Her knees hurt, her back ached, her hands shook when she tried to write. James helped her with everything. He drove her to doctor's appointments. He picked up her prescriptions. He made sure she ate real meals, not just crackers and tea. And when she was too tired to garden, he did it for her. Her roses still bloomed. Her lilies still grew, because James made sure of it. Eleanor's family? They didn't notice. Michael called twice that year, both times to complain about his business, both times to hint, strongly, that a little financial help would go a long way. Eleanor said no, both times. David sent a Christmas card with a generic message and no return address. Christine sent nothing. But James? James was there every single day. And Eleanor began to realize something. This boy, this stranger who owed her nothing, had given her more love in 2 years than her own children had given her in 2 decades. It was a painful realization, a heartbreaking one, but it was also freeing, because it meant she could finally let go of the guilt of not being enough, the guilt of disappointing them, the guilt of saying no. She didn't owe them anything, not anymore. That's when Eleanor made the decision. She called Jonathan Harrison, her attorney, and scheduled a meeting. I need to change my will, she said. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Are you sure, Eleanor? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She told him everything about her children's greed, about their neglect, about the years of conditional love that felt more like extortion than family. And she told him about James, his kindness, his patience, his presence. I want to leave everything to him, she said firmly. Jonathan hesitated. Eleanor, your family will contest this. You know that, right? Let them, Eleanor said. Her voice was calm, resolved. They don't love me, Jonathan. They love what I can give them, and I'm done giving. Jonathan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, I'll draft the paperwork. And he did. Eleanor signed it 6 months before she died. She didn't tell anyone, not her children, not James. It was her secret, her final act of justice. Eleanor died on a quiet Tuesday morning in early November. James found her. He had come to make her breakfast, as he did every morning. He knocked on the door. No answer. He let himself in with the key she'd given him. Mrs. Gray? He called. Silence. He walked to her bedroom. She was lying in bed, peaceful, her hands folded over her chest. She looked like she was sleeping, but James knew. He knelt beside her bed, tears streaming down his face. Goodbye, he whispered. Thank you for everything. He called the ambulance. Then he called the attorney, as Eleanor had asked him to do months earlier. When I'm gone, she had said, call Jonathan Harrison. He'll know what to do. James didn't understand, but he did as she asked. The funeral was small. Michael, David, and Christine showed up, dressed in black, their faces arranged in expressions of appropriate grief, but James could see through it. He'd spent 2 years watching them ignore her. He'd answered the phone calls they never made. He'd filled the silence they left behind. And now they stood at her grave pretending they cared. It made him sick, but he said nothing. He stood in the back, away from the family, and said his own quiet goodbye. Rest easy, Mrs. Gray, he whispered. You deserved better. 2 weeks later came the reading of the will. We already know what happened. The shock, the outrage, the betrayal. Michael was the first to explode. This is fraud, he shouted, standing up so fast his chair toppled backward. That kid manipulated her. She wasn't in her right mind. Jonathan remained calm. Mrs. Gray was evaluated by 2 separate doctors in the months before her death. Both confirmed she was of sound mind. This will is legally binding. Christine's voice was ice. We'll contest it. You can try, Jonathan said, but I assure you it won't change anything. Your mother made her wishes very clear, and she had very clear reasons. He pulled out a second document, a letter. She asked me to read this if there was any dispute. The room fell silent. Jonathan began to read. To my children, if you are hearing this, it means you are angry. It means you feel betrayed. It means you believe you deserved what I left behind. But let me ask you something. When was the last time you called me without needing something? When was the last time you visited without checking your watch? When was the last time you asked how I was and waited for a real answer? I gave you everything I had. My love, my time, my money, my forgiveness. But it was never enough, was it? You didn't want a mother, you wanted a bank. And so I gave my estate to someone who wanted nothing from me but my company. James never asked for money, he never asked for favors. He just showed up, day after day, when I was sick, when I was lonely, when I was forgotten by everyone else. He was there. And that, my children, is worth more than anything I could leave you. I hope one day you understand, but I'm not counting on it. With love and sadness, your mother. Silence. Michael's face was red. David looked at the floor. Christine's jaw was tight. And James? James stood in the corner, tears streaming down his face, his heart breaking for the woman who had been failed by the people who should have loved her most. The battle began immediately. Michael hired a lawyer. Christine hired a lawyer. David reluctantly joined them. They filed a motion to contest the will, claiming undue influence. "That boy manipulated her," Michael's lawyer argued in court. "He took advantage of a lonely, elderly woman." But Jonathan Harrison was prepared. He presented medical records, character witnesses, and most damaging of all, phone records. "Your Honor," Jonathan said, standing before the judge, "I'd like to submit evidence showing that in the final 2 years of Mrs. Gray's life, her son Michael called her 4 times. Her son David called 6 times. Her daughter Christine called twice. In that same period, James Collier visited Mrs. Gray over 700 times. The courtroom was silent. Mrs. Gray wasn't manipulated, Jonathan continued. She was abandoned, and she left her estate to the one person who refused to abandon her. The judge reviewed the evidence. Then he made his ruling. Motion denied. The will stands. Michael stormed out. Christine followed. David hesitated at the door, looking back at James with something that might have been shame, but he left too. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. The story had made headlines. Teacher leaves fortune to stranger, family furious. Greedy children lose inheritance battle. The will that exposed a family's true colors. Michael gave an interview, his face twisted with bitterness. "This isn't justice," he said. "That boy stole our mother's money." But the public didn't agree. The comments online were brutal. "Where were you when she was alive? You reap what you sow. Maybe if you'd acted like her children, she would have treated you like her children." The Gray family became infamous. A cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when love becomes greed. James didn't give interviews. He didn't respond to the hate mail the Gray family sent him. He simply took ownership of Eleanor's modest cottage. He kept her garden alive. He kept her roses blooming, and he lived there quietly, honoring her memory in the only way that mattered, by being present. 5 years later, James Collier stood in front of a classroom. He was 30 years old now. He'd finished college using the money Eleanor left him. He'd become a teacher, just like her. He taught English at Maplewood High School, the same school where Eleanor had taught for decades. And every morning before class started, he'd stand in front of the room and think about the woman who had changed his life. He thought about the lessons she'd taught him, not from books, but from life. Lessons about kindness, about presence, about the quiet, powerful act of simply showing up. He passed those lessons on to his students. He told them about Mrs. Gray, about how she had been forgotten by her family, but remembered by a stranger, about how she had given everything to people who gave nothing back. Love isn't about what you get, he'd tell them. It's about what you give. And the people worth loving are the ones who give freely, without expecting anything in return. His students listened, really listened, because they could see it in his eyes, the truth of it, the weight of it, the beauty of it. One afternoon, a girl named Sarah stayed after class. She was 16, quiet, shy. "Mr. Collier?" she said hesitantly. "Yes?" "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me that kindness matters." James smiled. "It does," he said softly, "more than anything." Sarah nodded, and as she left, James felt something warm in his chest, a feeling he recognized. It was Eleanor's presence, still there, still teaching, still reminding him that love never truly dies. It just changes form. This story isn't about money. It's not about inheritance or courtrooms or legal battles. It's about something far more valuable. It's about presence, about the simple, profound act of showing up. We live in a world that measures love in gifts and grand gestures, but the truth is simpler than that. Love is sitting with someone when they're lonely. Love is calling without needing something. Love is remembering birthdays and showing up to funerals and asking, "How are you?" and waiting for the real answer. Eleanor Gray gave her family everything, but they only wanted more. James Collier gave her nothing but his time, and it was everything she needed. There's a lesson here, a hard one, but a necessary one. You can't buy love. You can't inherit it. You can't demand it or guilt people into giving it. Love is earned through presence, through consistency, through the quiet, unglamorous work of simply being there. Eleanor's children learned that lesson too late. By the time they realized what they'd lost, it was already gone. But James learned it early, and it changed his life. So here's my question for you. Who are you in this story? Are you Michael, David, or Christine? Calling only when you need something, showing up only when it's convenient, measuring relationships by what you can gain? Or are you James, showing up without expectation, giving without keeping score, loving because it's the right thing to do, not because it's the profitable thing to do? It's not too late to change. It's not too late to call someone you've been ignoring. It's not too late to show up, to be present, to prove that love isn't just a word, it's an action. Eleanor Gray spent 73 years giving, and in the end, she gave one final gift, a lesson about what really matters. Not wealth, not success, not status, but presence, time, love, the things we can't take with us, the things we can only give away. So give them before it's too late, before the people you love become strangers, before your presence becomes absence, before your love becomes regret. Call them, visit them, sit with them, listen to them, be there, because in the end, that's all anyone really wants, to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, not for what they have, but for who they are. Eleanor Gray understood that. James Collier understood that. Do you? If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Hit that share button and let's spread this message of love and kindness together.